The axe fell with a rhythm born of grief, each swing a punctuation mark in a silent, unending sentence. Elias worked in the biting wind, his world reduced to the sharp scent of pine and the white canvas of the high country. Snow clung to the branches of the firs, heavy as shrouds, and the sky was the color of old iron. His cabin stood behind him, a dark shape against the endless white, smoke curling from its stone chimney like a lonely prayer. This was his penance, this self-imposed exile. The silence was his cell, the cold his warden. He had built this life over the grave of another, a small, unmarked rise of stones he could see from his window. He chopped wood not just for warmth, but to exhaust the part of him that still remembered how to feel anything else. A flicker of movement at the edge of the timberline broke his rhythm. It was not a deer, nor a wolf. It was a shape, dark and stumbling, a flaw in the perfect, desolate landscape. The figure fell, rose, and fell again, a desperate, failing struggle against the deep snow. Elias rested the axe against the splitting block. His first instinct, honed by years of solitude, was to turn away, to retreat into the numbness of his routine. The mountains were indifferent, and so was he. But the figure did not rise a third time. A ghost of the man he used to be stirred within him. He left the axe and began to walk, his long strides eating up the distance, the crunch of his boots the only sound in the world. It was a woman. Her face, when he brushed the snow from it, was pale as porcelain, her lips a shade of blue that spoke of a battle nearly lost. Her dark hair was splayed against the snow, and one hand was clutched tight to her side, where a dark stain was beginning to bloom through her worn coat. He saw the frantic terror in her eyes before they fluttered shut. Without a word, he gathered her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, a bird with a broken wing. As he carried her back toward the cabin, the wind howled, as if trying to reclaim her. He kicked the door open and laid her gently on the bearskin rug before the hearth, the firelight casting flickering shadows across her still face. He worked with a quiet efficiency, cutting away the ruined fabric of her coat and blouse. A crude, stitched wound on her side had torn open. Beneath it, just above her hip, was a brand seared into her skin, a cruel, intricate symbol of a coiled snake. Elias's hands stilled. He knew the mark. His breath caught in his chest, a shard of ice. The past he had buried under a mountain of snow had just walked through his door. He cleaned and dressed the wound, his touch gentle despite the sudden tremor in his hands. He wrapped her in thick wool blankets and sat back on his heels, watching her. He was no longer just a man in a cabin. He was a guardian at a gate he thought had long since crumbled. She woke hours later to the smell of broth and the soft crackle of the fire. She sat up with a gasp, her eyes wide with fear, searching the shadows of the room. Elias sat in a chair across from her, a bowl of stew in his hands. He said nothing, just pushed the bowl forward in offering. She stared at him, her gaze darting from his weathered face to the rifle leaning against the wall, then to the door. "Eat," he said. His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. She took the bowl, her hands shaking. She ate quickly, desperately, not taking her eyes off him. When she was done, she set the empty bowl on the floor. "Who are you?" she whispered. "A man who doesn't like finding bodies on his land," he replied, his gaze fixed on the fire. "He'll come for me." Her voice was flat, devoid of hope. "He always comes." Elias looked at her then, truly looked at her. He saw the trauma etched into the fine lines around her eyes, the haunted knowledge that safety was an illusion. "Silas," he said. It wasn't a question. Her head snapped up, a new kind of fear and confusion in her eyes. "How do you know his name?" He didn't answer. Instead, he rose and added another log to the fire, the flames leaping up to lick at the fresh wood. The gesture was his only reply. A fragile truce settled over the cabin for 2 days. They lived in the spaces between words. He hunted, she tended the fire. He'd leave a plate of food on the table and she would eat it when he wasn't looking. She saw him standing by the stone grave in the swirling snow, his head bowed, and she began to understand the shape of his sorrow. He saw the way she checked the windows, the way she flinched at the sound of the wind, and he knew the depth of her terror. On the third morning he found the tracks. 3 horses, not more than a half-mile from the cabin. They hadn't approached, just watched. A message. He returned to find her by the window, clutching a small wooden carving of a bird he hadn't noticed before. "You knew him," she said, her back to him. "Silas?" "A long time ago," Elias said, his voice low. "We rode together. Before I came here." "He told me about you," she said, turning to face him. "The partner who lost his nerve. The one who ran after a job went bad." Her eyes drifted toward the window, toward the grave. "After your wife was killed." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Elias felt the old wound tear open, the one no stitches could ever close. "He said you were a ghost. A man already dead." "He was right," Elias said, his voice hollow. "Then why help me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You should have left me in the snow. He'll kill you for this, maybe," Elias said, his gaze hardening as he looked past her, out into the unforgiving white. "But no one else dies on this mountain. Not while I'm here." The quiet was shattered that night. A rock crashed through the window, sending a spray of glass and freezing air into the room. It was a warning shot. Elias grabbed his rifle from the wall. He looked at Lena, her face pale in the moonlight, her hand clutching the little wooden bird so tightly her knuckles were white. There was no fear in her eyes now, only a cold, hard resolve. She had stopped running. "Stay away from the door," he commanded, his voice a low growl. The front door splintered inwards with a heavy kick. Silas stood framed in the doorway, a silhouette against the moonlit snow. He was a big man, smiling a predator's smile, a long-barreled pistol held loosely at his side. 2 other men fanned out behind him. "Elias," Silas said, his voice deceptively calm. "I knew I smelled a coward up here, hiding from the world. And look what you found. My property." He gestured with his pistol toward Lena. "She's coming with me." "She's not going anywhere," Elias said, the rifle steady in his hands. Silas laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the small cabin. "You were always sentimental. That's what got Maria killed, wasn't it?" You hesitated. Elias's jaw clenched. He saw it again, for 1,000th time. The flash of gunfire, Maria falling, his own hesitation costing him everything. "This time?" Silas sneered, raising his pistol. "You can die with her." The world exploded in sound and motion. He was the man he had been before, the dangerous man Silas remembered. But now he was fighting for more than just money or survival. "And I did. I gave her my protection." He tapped the brand on his own forearm, the twin of the one on Lena's skin. "My mark." The truth hit Elias like a physical blow. He hadn't just saved a stranger. He had unknowingly fulfilled a promise to his dead wife. Suddenly, the fire in the hearth didn't seem warm enough. Silas turned, firing wildly. The bullet ripped through Elias's shoulder, spinning him around. He grunted in pain, but his aim held true. He fired the rifle. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Silas stumbled backward, a look of surprise on his face, before collapsing into the hearth. His coat caught on the embers, and in seconds he was engulfed in flame. The fire spread quickly, licking up the dry wooden walls of the cabin. The smoke was thick and choking. Elias grabbed Lena's arm, his vision swimming. "We have to go." Now they burst out into the freezing night air, collapsing in the snow as the roof of the cabin gave way, sending a shower of sparks into the dark sky. They watched as the fire consumed everything: the cabin, the ghosts, the past. It burned with a cleansing ferocity, a funeral pyre for the life of solitude Elias had built. The cold was brutal, but for the first time in years Elias didn't feel it. He looked at Lena. Her face was smudged with soot, her eyes reflecting the orange glow of the flames. She was watching the fire, but then her gaze shifted, turning toward the vast, dark wilderness beyond. He saw the old instinct in her eyes, the urge to run, to disappear, to become a ghost herself. He reached out, his wounded arm screaming in protest, and his hands found her hips, holding her firm. He pulled her back against him, shielding her from the wind with his own body. She tensed, ready to bolt, but he held on, his grip gentle but unyielding. She looked up at him, her breath misting in the air, her eyes asking a question he had to answer. He leaned down, his voice raw with pain and a desperate, unfamiliar hope. "The fire took my ghosts," he rasped. "Don't you go become one." He held her gaze, letting her see the vow in his eyes, the promise that was more than a threat, that was the foundation of something new being built on the ashes of the old. "If you leave again," he vowed, his voice cracking with the weight of the words, "I'm hunting you down." She didn't pull away. Instead, for the first time, she leaned into him, her body finally relaxing against his. She stared at the flames, at the end of one world and the terrifying, uncertain beginning of another. And in the heart of the unforgiving winter, surrounded by the ruins of the past, they stood together, two survivors anchored against the storm.